A 911 dispatcher picks up the line, and the only thing more chilling than the sheer volume of blood inside the house is the terrifyingly calm conversational voice of the man reporting it.
Oh, yeah.
He tells the operator that his wife is currently lying on their bedroom floor, having just repeatedly stabbed herself in the face and neck. But the detail that elevates this from a rural Ohio tragedy into, like, a calculated psychological horror show.
Right.
He claims that right before she plunged a 13.5-inch knife into her own throat, he could hear her laughing hysterically from the other room.
Immediately. I mean, you absolutely have to stick around until the end of this episode to hear the unbelievable resolution, because the single piece of physical evidence that shatters his entire story defies the fundamental laws of human anatomy. It is not just unlikely, it is medically, physically, and geometrically impossible.
We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Wild Crime Podcasts. We are officially done with boring, slow burn true crime or tearing into the most baffling cases on Earth, untangling the lies and dropping you right in the middle of the madness.
Whether you are on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we are here to walk you through the mystery and make your next hour incredibly thrilling.
So let us establish the exact coordinates of this nightmare.
Yeah, set the scene for us.
The date is October 23rd, 2025. The location is the 2100 block of State Route 187 in London, Madison County, Ohio.
Okay, so a pretty quiet area.
Right. It is a jurisdiction that balances, a quiet rural atmosphere with surprisingly robust, technologically equipped local law enforcement.
Which is going to be incredibly important later.
Exactly. The victim at the center of this is 32-year-old Rachel Long, and by every metric we have, she is a cornerstone of her community.
Did really what?
She is a beloved mother of 2 children. She is a passionate animal rescuer, an avid reader who loves attending live rock concerts, and an entrepreneur. She owns and operates a highly popular, thriving local pet grooming business called Pawfect Pups.
And the suspect in this scenario is her 35-year-old husband, Kyle Long. We're looking at a man who seemingly thought he could, script an entirely fictional horror movie, cast himself as the grieving lead actor, and somehow convince seasoned forensic investigators that they were watching a documentary.
We are going to tear apart the timeline of the so-called suicide in a moment, but first you have to hear the exact chilling words he used when the police finally answered the phone.
It is the delivery that gives it away. I mean, everything about his vocal demeanor screams that something is horribly structurally wrong with this narrative long before the first squad car even turns its sirens on.
So let us look at Kyle's official narrative. This is the exact unyielding story he hands to the authorities on day one.
Right.
He claims that on that late October afternoon, he was simply in a separate room of the house watching television, a completely mundane domestic afternoon.
Sure.
According to his timeline, Rachel goes into their bedroom alone. He says she suddenly begins laughing uncontrollably. He specifically uses the concept of hysterical laughter.
Which is such a bizarre detail to include.
It really is. Then, according to his script, that laughter abruptly morphs into screaming. He claims he walks into the bedroom to find her inexplicably stabbing herself with a massive kitchen knife.
Okay, let us interrogate the physics of this so-called television alibi, because it fundamentally falls apart the second you apply basic acoustic science to it.
How so?
Think of the sound transmission class, or, the STC rating of standard interior residential drywall and hollow core bedroom doors.
Right, the stuff most houses are built with.
Exactly. They are designed for basic privacy, not soundproofing. How incredibly loud does a television set have to be to entirely mask the low-frequency, high-impact sounds of a fatal, incredibly violent, prolonged physical struggle?
That makes a lot of sense.
We are talking about bodies hitting the floor, the scuffling of feet, the blunt force impacts against furniture. Yet simultaneously, his television is magically quiet enough for him to perfectly isolate and identify the high-frequency nuance of someone laughing through a closed door.
Right, the physics of the sound waves completely contradict his story.
It is selective hearing engineered for a police report. I mean, if your television is blasting an action movie loudly enough to drown out a physical fight for survival, you do not hear laughter through a solid barrier.
No, of course not.
Conversely, if the television is on a low volume, you hear the entirety of the struggle. You hear the thuds. You hear the erratic movement. You hear the sheer, breathy desperation of a human being fighting to stay alive. You do not just hear a theatrical, disembodied laugh track followed by a scream.
So you're saying he made it up?
He is staging an auditory illusion for the audience of the 911 dispatcher.
And speaking of the dispatcher, when you analyze the exact linguistics he used on that call, the psychological distancing is alarming.
Oh, absolutely.
His precise quote to the operator is, "My wife just stabbed herself. There's no pulse, blood all over the place."
The clinical coldness of that delivery is staggering. Yeah. There is no pulse. He is delivering a medical status update, not a desperate plea for salvation.
He also repeatedly uses the word inexplicably when talking to the first responding investigators. He says she inexplicably started doing this. What is the psychological function of using a polished, multi-syllable vocabulary word like inexplicably when your spouse of 10 years is bleeding out on the hardwood floor?
It is a linguistic shield. By explicitly declaring the event inexplicable, he is preemptively shutting down any expectation that he should provide context.
Interesting.
When a normal human being witnesses their partner engaging in catastrophic self-harm, their brain goes into frantic problem-solving mode. They are screaming, they are applying pressure to the wounds.
Yeah, you would be a complete mess.
And most importantly, they're frantically vocalizing a search for a reason. They will tell dispatchers, like, she was just crying so hard this morning, or we just had a terrible argument about money. They offer context because the human brain desperately seeks logic in the face of trauma.
But I want to push back on that for just a second. People do go into shock, right?
They do, yes.
Is it entirely out of the realm of possibility that a guy walks into a bloodbath, his brain completely short-circuits due to the trauma, and he just detaches? Could a defense attorney argue that his flat affect and his weird vocabulary are just the byproducts of acute psychological shock rather than calculation?
A defense attorney will absolutely try to argue that. And it is true that shock can cause emotional blunting. However, clinical shock usually presents as confusion, stuttering, and inability to process basic instructions from the dispatcher or, repetitive phrasing.
So kind of a scrambled brain.
Right. It does not typically present as a perfectly linear, highly articulate, vocabulary-rich narrative that seamlessly absolves the caller of all responsibility. He is standing in a room with blood, as he noted, all over the place, and his vocal cadence suggests he is reciting a grocery list.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Would you have bought the laughing story for a single second, or does that sound exactly like a bad horror movie script?
The dispatcher's recording is deeply troubling, but that pales in comparison to the horrifying 4-minute secret hidden inside his cell phone history.
Yes, the phone data. When the Madison County detectives and the digital forensics team really start reconstructing the electronic footprint of that afternoon, they discover something that absolutely annihilates his calm, bewildered facade.
It completely destroys his timeline.
That successful 911 call, the one where he articulately claims she inexplicably stabbed herself, that was not his first attempt to use his phone.
Not even close.
He actually dialed 911 earlier, but he abruptly terminated the call before ever speaking a single word to the dispatcher. And exactly 4 minutes passed between that aborted silent phone call and the final successful call where he delivers his practice performance.
4 minutes. I mean, we really need to quantify what 4 minutes means in the context of catastrophic arterial bleeding.
It is a lifetime.
That is an absolute eternity in a medical emergency. What in the world was he physically doing for those 240 seconds while his wife was actively dying on the floor?
Well, in forensic pathology and crime scene reconstruction, that 4-minute gap is referred to as the deadly dark window. When you are dealing with massive trauma, seconds are the difference between life and death.
Exactly.
You do not dial 911, hang up, and stand in silence for 4 minutes. Investigators look at that window and they immediately see the operational time required for forensic staging.
He is physically curating the environment.
Precisely. He is placing the weapon in a specific location. He is altering his own clothing or washing his hands. But perhaps most chillingly, he's using those 4 minutes to internally rehearse his narrative.
Wow. That is dark.
Think about the physiological reality of what just happened. His heart rate is likely through the roof. His adrenaline is spiking. He dials the first time, realizes his breathing is too heavy, realizes he has not fully memorized his lines, hangs up, and takes the time to regulate his central nervous system.
He literally takes a breather.
Yes. He takes deep breaths. He constructs the laughter detail in his head. And then he dials again exactly 4 minutes later when he is biologically and psychologically prepared to perform.
That implies a terrifying, almost reptilian level of calculation. Because if that first hang-up was just a frantic mistake, like if his hands were shaking and he accidentally dropped the phone, a panicked, innocent person immediately scrambles to call back within seconds.
Yeah, you would pick it right back up.
But a 4-minute uninterrupted delay, that is a strategic operational pause. He was waiting until the physical scene matched his fictional script, and far more darkly, he was waiting until Rachel was past the physiological point of resuscitation.
Oh my God.
He fundamentally could not risk the paramedics arriving while she was still conscious, intubated, and capable of eventually telling the police what really happened.
And if we want to talk about the truth of her state of mind, we have to look at Rachel's digital alibi. Kyle is trying to sell this profile of a woman who just snapped. A sudden psychotic suicidal break from reality out of absolute nowhere.
Right, his whole inexplicably narrative.
But when forensic analysts pull Rachel's cellular data, they look at her specific activity just moments prior to her death, strictly before Kyle's first aborted 911 call.
What is the exact nature of her digital footprint in those final moments?
She was actively engaged in a text conversation with a friend.
Let me guess, the tone of those messages did not resemble a suicide note.
Far from it. Her messages were coherent, upbeat, and entirely future-oriented. She was excitedly discussing plans to attend an upcoming rock concert.
Rock concert.
Yes, she was organizing her social calendar. There is absolutely zero clinical evidence in those texts of the unstable emotional volatility or the unhinged hysteria that Kyle described.
Let us examine the psychological whiplash required to make his story true. I mean, it completely defies basic psychiatric logic. To believe his narrative, you have to believe that someone casually ordering a coffee, laughing with a friend about a band they love, can completely alter their entire neurochemistry and inflict catastrophic, painful violence on themselves just seconds later.
Right, it just does not happen.
Human beings do not operate like a light switch. The human brain's survival instinct is the strongest biological drive we possess. It requires immense, overwhelming despair to override it, not a fleeting impulse between text messages.
But again, let me play devil's advocate here. What if she had a secret underlying mental health condition? We hear about high-functioning depression all the time, right?
Yeah.
People who smile for the cameras plan their week, but internally they are entirely hollowed out. Could the defense argue that she was masking her despair and the text messages were just her performing normalcy right up until the end?
It is a valid legal theory to explore, but the clinical data does not support the execution. Yeah. While high-functioning depression is incredibly real and people absolutely mask their pain, the actual physical manifestation of severe self-harm, especially using a 13.5-inch kitchen knife to attack one's own face, is almost universally preceded by observable behavioral leakage.
What does that mean, behavioral leakage?
We are talking about withdrawal, giving away possessions, profound lethargy, or previous ideation. Rachel was a mother of 2. She was running a highly successful enterprise in Pawfek pups. She was deeply integrated into animal rescue networks.
She was busy.
She was a woman in forward motion. The text messages are a digital anchor to reality. They prove that she was psychologically grounded right up until the violence commenced. She was fine, she sent a text about a concert, and then the violence erupted in that tiny immediate window just before Kyle's first aborted call.
We will get to the gruesome autopsy report that legally dismantled his story in just a second, but we have to pause the timeline right now to look inside the mind of a man who thought this ridiculous theatrical lie would actually survive a police investigation.
We really do, because the sheer arrogance required to architect this specific lie gives us a massive window into his pathology.
It is the absolute narcissism of the laughter detail that strikes me. Think about the choices he made in constructing this lie. He did not just say she was silently weeping. He did not say she was screaming in agony from the first moment.
Right, which would be slightly more believable.
He explicitly chose to say she was laughing hysterically. That is not a clever, subtle ruse. That is a fatal, arrogant overreach.
It is chronic overacting. He is attempting to gaslight the responding officers into believing in an extreme cinematic version of a psychological collapse. He wants to pathologize Rachel so heavily that the police walk into the room, look at the carnage, and think, well, she was clearly entirely insane, no need to investigate further, case closed.
But tying it up with a neat little bow.
But he fundamentally misunderstands human behavior and clinical depression. Real suicidal despair does not look like theatrical, Joker-esque laughter while plunging a blade into your own face. That is a trope you see in a comic book villain or a bad slasher film, not the reality of a 32-year-old mother experiencing a crisis.
Right, and it exposes his performative delusion. You see, investigators uncovered that Kyle Long was an ex-American Idol hopeful.
Wait, the reality television singing competition, he actually auditioned.
Yes. He had this deeply ingrained background of wanting to be on stage, wanting to hold an audience's attention, wanting to be in the spotlight.
Oh, wow.
And behavioral analysts looking at this case strongly suggest that this performative background fed directly into his delusion. He genuinely believed that he could just act the part of a grieving, confused widower well enough to outsmart the Madison County Sheriff's Office and the highly trained technicians at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation.
He literally thought he could audition his way out of a homicide investigation. He thought his emotional performance was so compelling and his script so tight that the detectives would just nod in sympathy and walk away.
Exactly.
It's pure hubris. Narcissists often believe they are the smartest person in any given room. He likely thought rural law enforcement would be easily overwhelmed by a dramatic story and would not possess the forensic capabilities to challenge him.
He attempted to weaponize the architectural blind spot in the home's layout with the television room, and he attempted to weaponize this entirely fake auditory detail of laughter, thinking he was a film director blocking out a scene.
Yeah, controlling the narrative.
But the massive flaw in his logic is that he arrogantly assumed the police would only listen to his dialogue and not rigorously examine the physical environment.
His psychological profile is a complete mess.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely nothing compared to the physical evidence waiting at the crime scene. The forensics completely break the laws of human anatomy.
When the Montgomery County Coroner's Office finally completed their exhaustive autopsy, the brutal mathematical reality of the scene came to light. Kyle explicitly claimed Rachel inexplicably stabbed herself.
Right.
But the medical examiner did not find just one or two shallow hesitation marks, which is what you might rarely see in a complex self-inflicted wound case as the person works up the nerve. Rachel Long suffered 17 separate, devastating, sharp force injuries to her face and neck.
17. I mean, we need to really process that number. 17 separate stabs to the facial and cervical region.
Yes. 17 distinct impacts.
That is massive, undeniable overkill. In forensic pathology, overkill of the face and neck indicates intense, profoundly personal rage. It is designed to erase the person's identity.
It is so gruesome.
That is not the methodology of someone trying to end their own internal pain. That is the methodology of someone trying to obliterate another human being.
But let us look at the mechanics of that. Is it physically possible for a person to endure the pain of stabbing their own face 17 times?
It is practically impossible due to the body's physiological failsafes. Think about the sheer mechanical force and cardiovascular stamina required to inflict 17 deep, penetrating wounds through muscle, cartilage, and bone.
It would take a lot of energy.
Your central nervous system is designed to prevent self-destruction. Stabbing yourself 17 times in the face isn't like taking a chemical overdose where the body simply shuts down and fades out. It's like trying to hold your bare hand flat on a burning hot stove.
You would flinch immediately.
You might have the willpower to put it there for a second, but your central nervous system will forcibly override your conscious brain and violently retract your muscles to stop the pain. By the third or fourth strike, her body would have physically rebelled, gone into profound hemorrhagic shock, her hands would have slipped on the blood, and she would have lost the mechanical capacity to continue generating force.
And remember the 911 call where Kyle calmly stated there was blood all over the place.
Right, the spatter.
The crime scene technicians mapped the room, the sheer volume of blood, the cast-off patterns on the walls, and the specific spatter distribution around the room entirely indicate a highly mobile, desperate, dynamic struggle for her life. This was not a static, contained event where someone inflicts a wound and simply collapses in one spot.
No, absolutely not.
This was a violent, chaotic fight that moved across the geography of the bedroom.
She was fighting him. She was fighting for her life, attempting to evade the blade, and the geometric distribution of the blood absolutely proves that movement.
Which brings us to the most devastating forensic blow of the entire investigation. The physical evidence that completely destroys his timeline, his script, and his freedom.
The hand.
The hands. During his initial extensive interviews with the police, Kyle made a massive tactical error. He provided them with a highly specific, granular detail.
Which is always a mistake for a liar.
Yes. He explicitly told police that when he walked into the bedroom, Rachel was tightly clutching the massive 13.5-inch knife in her right hand to inflict the wounds on herself. He verbally locked himself into that specific physical geometry. The weapon was firmly in her right hand.
Okay, so picture the biomechanics. She is supposedly gripping the handle of this large knife securely with her right hand, wrapping her fingers around the hilt.
Yes, that is his claim. But the autopsy revealed the absolute geometric impossibility of that statement. The medical examiner documented that Rachel had deep bilateral defensive cuts on the palms and insides of both of her hands.
Both hands. Let us be absolutely clear.
Both hands, including the right hand. The exact hand he claimed was gripping the weapon.
Think about holding a tennis racket. Your fingers are tightly wrapped around the handle, completely burying your palm, and the delicate flexor tendons on the inside of your fingers against the grip.
Right, you cannot see your palm.
If Rachel was firmly gripping a 13.5-inch knife handle, the tissue on the inside of her right hand was completely shielded by the physical mass of the handle itself. You cannot get deep lacerations across the inner surface of a closed fist. How does someone sustain deep, slashing defensive wounds on the exact same right hand that is supposedly tightly wielding the weapon?
They cannot. It defies the laws of physics. It defies human geometry.
The only way she sustains those specific cuts is if her hands are open, palms facing outward, desperately grabbing at the sharp edge of a blade that someone else is forcefully thrusting toward her.
Makes me sick just thinking about it.
It definitively proves an external force was wielding the knife. It proves Kyle was holding the handle, and she was violently grabbing the steel blade with both of her bare hands to try and pull it away from her throat. She was shielding herself. Those are the textbook defensive markers of a homicide victim fighting off an attacker, not a suicide victim.
It is the absolute forensic antithesis of suicide. And then, the medical examiner actually points out that the specific angles of entry for the 17 wounds were physically impossible for a human being to achieve on their own body.
Let alone while bleeding out.
Especially while simultaneously suffering severe, debilitating lacerations to the tendons of both hands. She would not have had the grip strength left to hold the knife, let alone plunge it into herself. It is a mechanical impossibility.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. How did the police let him stay in his house after hearing that highly specific right-hand lie while looking directly at those defensive wounds? Because to a layperson, the second they saw her palms at the scene, he should have been placed in handcuffs.
The physical evidence screams murder on day one, which makes what the law enforcement apparatus did next absolutely infuriating to the public.
Walk us through the legal timeline, because you were telling me they did not arrest him immediately upon seeing the body.
The murder took place on October 23rd, 2025. Kyle Long was not officially arrested until Wednesday, March 4th, 2026.
Oh my God.
That is an agonizing, excruciating 4-month gap. 132 days where Kyle Long was allowed to remain completely free in the community.
Over 4 months. Think about the psychological terror of that reality. A man who allegedly stabbed his wife 17 times, told a geometrically impossible lie to 9/11, and had zero physical evidence supporting his story. Was just walking around the rural town of London, going to the grocery store, getting coffee, living his daily life.
Just carrying on.
The fear and profound distrust that must have generated in the community is immense. People knew Rachel. They loved her. She groomed their dogs at Poffick Pups. Her clients and friends knew with absolute certainty that she did not violently end her own life. And yet, the husband, who is the only other living soul in the house, is just walking free, unbothered.
But let us look at this from the perspective of the Madison County Sheriff's Office and the prosecutors. They maintained from the start that they were treating the scene as highly suspicious. They immediately called in the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation to help process the complex forensic evidence.
Sure.
But why do prosecutors wait? Why allow him to stay free?
This is the agonizing gap between knowing someone did it and proving it beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Probable cause to arrest is one threshold, but prosecutors often want an airtight indictment before they tip their hand.
They want a slam dunk.
They are waiting for the final official coroner's report to be published. They are waiting for exhaustive toxicology results to ensure the defense cannot claim she was under the influence of mind-altering substances. And, most importantly, they are waiting for the digital forensics.
Exactly. And during that 132-day delay, Kyle used his unearned freedom to aggressively fortify his position. He hired high-end, aggressive legal counsel. He retained defense attorney Samuel Szymanski, who spent those entire 4 months confidently claiming to the press that Kyle was fully cooperating with the investigation and looking forward to clearing his name.
We need to decode what fully cooperating actually means when a high-priced defense attorney says it. It is a tactical mask.
Oh, for sure.
It's a calculated strategy that guilty individuals use to avoid appearing evasive, combative, or guilty. They operate under the delusion that if they simply open the front door for the police, offer them a cup of coffee, and nod politely, the detectives will view them as a helpful witness and eventually just cross them off the suspect list.
Just play nice and they will go away.
The sheriff went on record defending the massive delay, stating that homicide investigations are not always cut and dry like they are on television, but let us be honest. The biomechanics of the hands alone make it incredibly cut and dry.
And if the biomechanics of the hands were not enough to arrest him, Kyle essentially handed them the most shocking motive admission on a silver platter on day one.
What did he voluntarily disclose?
During his very first initial interviews with the responding deputies, while he is desperately trying to sell this fabricated suicide narrative, he willingly admits that Rachel had recently told him she wanted a separation from their marriage. After 10 years together, she wanted out.
He volunteered that information to the police before he even had a lawyer present.
He essentially put a neon sign over his own head. He told the deputies his wife wanted to leave him.
His absolute lack of self-preservation and his profound misunderstanding of criminal profiling is astounding. He literally handed them the oldest, most statistically dominant motive in the history of intimate partner violence.
It is textbook.
The psychology of the family annihilator or the domestic abuser is almost always rooted in a loss of control. If I cannot control you, if I cannot have you, no one else is allowed to. And he arrogantly assumes his flimsy, poorly acted suicide label is just going to magically override the most glaring, statistically probable motive for murder on Earth.
It is astonishing. He genuinely believed the highly trained police investigators would hear the statement she wanted a divorce and the statement she stabbed herself 17 times in the face and think, wow, what a tragic, entirely unrelated coincidence.
Like they would not connect those dots.
Those two things clearly have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
Let's look at Rachel's reality. She was actively building a new, independent life. The last people to physically see her alive, other than Kyle, reported that she was deeply excited for a new adventure as a single mother.
She was ready to move on.
She was stepping into her power, organizing her finances, and planning for her future. She was leaving him. And his fragile ego, his deep-seated narcissism, fundamentally could not process the rejection. He felt his control slipping. So he violently, brutally ends her life and then possesses the sheer audacity to try and frame her for her own murder, tarnishing her legacy in the process.
The fact that he handed over his own motive is crazy, but his psychological reaction to finally being put in handcuffs proves just how cold-blooded and calculated this entire charade really was.
Walk me through his post-crime conduct, because I guarantee you, based on his psychological profile, he was not spending those 132 days weeping over photo albums.
You would be entirely correct. While he was walking free in the community, playing the role of the tragic, misunderstood victim, he was actively and aggressively demanding life insurance details regarding Rachel's policies.
Of course he was. The ink on the initial police report is not even dry. His wife has suffered an unimaginable, horrifically violent death, and his primary cognitive focus is trying to secure the financial payout.
It is all about the money.
The shift to financial focus so soon after a traumatic incident is a massive behavioral red flag for investigators. It demonstrates a complete lack of genuine grief.
But the digital forensics are where the net truly closes. Authorities executed search warrants and seized all of his electronics, including his personal devices and his work computer. And while the prosecution has not released the full, granular digital forensic report to the public yet pending trial, the fact that they explicitly seized his work computer strongly suggests they found a damning digital footprint.
They found his search history.
Investigators are almost certainly looking at premeditated research. They're looking for search history queries on how to defeat a coroner's autopsy, how to physically stage a crime scene to look like a suicide, or how life insurance companies pay out in the event of a self-inflicted death.
He thought he could out-research the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation using a search engine. It all cycles back to that fatal hubris. He believed he could acquire enough surface-level forensic knowledge online to outsmart people who have dedicated decades of their lives to studying blood spatter and biomechanics.
And when the arrest warrant was finally executed in March, his high-profile attorney made a very specific statement to the press. He stood in front of the cameras and said Kyle was disappointed but not surprised by his arrest.
Disappointed but not surprised. Let us really analyze the linguistics of what not surprised means in this specific legal context. If you are a genuinely innocent man, and the police show up at your door 4 months after your wife's tragic, inexplicable suicide to slap steel handcuffs on your wrists and charge you with a brutal first-degree murder, you are overwhelmingly shocked.
You would be screaming.
You are outraged. You are fighting the officers, screaming from the rooftops that they are making a catastrophic mistake. You are fundamentally, deeply surprised.
Exactly. You do not just shrug your shoulders, look at the cameras, and say, well, I am disappointed, but I kind of saw this coming.
The only person who is not surprised by a murder arrest in a complex forensic case
Yeah.
is the person who committed the murder. That phrase implies that he spent those entire 4 months mentally rehearsing his eventual defense.
Just
He
waiting.
was sitting in his house, waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting the forensic net to eventually close around him, because deep down in his core,
Yeah.
he knew the right-hand lie was a ticking time bomb that the autopsy would eventually detonate. He knew he left loose ends.
I know half of you driving right now are screaming at your phone, wondering how this guy thought he could outsmart modern forensic science. If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. What is the single most arrogant, fatal mistake he made in this entire cover-up? Was it the 4-minute gap before calling 911? Was it injecting the theatrical laughing detail? Or was it claiming the knife was in her right hand when her right hand was literally covered in defensive wounds?
For me, it is the combination of the defensive hand wounds and the hysterical laughter. It provides a terrifying window into how little he respected Rachel as a human being and how little he respected the intelligence of the investigators. He viewed everyone around him as props in his own personal stage play.
As we look toward the May 2026 trial date, Kyle Long currently sits behind bars on a $1.5 million bond. The community of London, Ohio is still deeply grieving Rachel, a bright light who spent her time rescuing animals, building a business, and loving her children. For a brief moment, her legacy was overshadowed by her husband's dark and genuinely unbelievable cover story.
But the miraculous, undeniable work of the medical examiner, the physics of acoustics, and the physical truth of the forensic evidence is going to entirely displace his bizarre fiction in front of a jury. Science does not lie, even when the suspect does.
And that leaves us with one final, lingering question to explore on your own as we wait for the trial. If investigators seized his work computer and his personal electronics and found suspicious digital footprints, well, what exactly did he search for in the weeks before her death that made him think a 17-stab suicide was a believable alibi? What horrifying deleted data is sitting on those hard drives, recovered by forensic experts, just waiting to be projected onto a screen and shown to the jury?
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you are watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this frequently, bringing you the most fascinating cases in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy mysteries we have queued up for next time. See you then.